All right. Hello, everyone. In this short, or hopefully relatively short, video lecture, I'll be talking about some of the basics of rhetorical analysis and expanding on rhetorical situation in particular. I think that this is one of the things that a lot of students struggle with is figuring out what we mean by rhetorical situation. There are several different ways that we can talk about rhetorical situation and a couple different tools that we can use to understand rhetorical situation, which is what we're going to go into today. Now, to begin with, because we've talked about rhetoric, what is rhetoric, right? Rhetoric is a way to persuade someone. But what about that word situation? So what is a situation and what does that word mean to you? So I would encourage you to pause the video for a moment and just think about that word situation. A lot of the time we use words all the time, but defining them can be kind of tricky. So go ahead, pause for a second, and then I'll go on. I'll give you a definition here as to what situation is. So a situation, according to the dictionary definition, is a set of circumstances in which one finds oneself, a state of affairs. I think that's a pretty good definition. I don't feel like it really explains what we're talking about, because that would mean a rhetorical situation is persuading someone in a certain circumstance. But what goes into that circumstance? What are the parts of that situation, if you will? So from our reading this week from Colorado State, they have a good definition, I think, of rhetorical situation. And I'll just read this out. It says, a rhetorical situation is a writing situation, a context in which writers and readers bring different purposes, interests, beliefs, and backgrounds to the creation and reception of texts. And we define text in the widest possible way to include any medium used to share information, ideas, and arguments. So what's important, I think, is that rhetorical situation, that writing situation or communication situation, includes a lot of different factors. So that situation is, what's the purpose? What are our interests? What are our beliefs, right? What background are we bringing to this? And that will help us figure out who the audience is and how we can be effective with an audience, which is why we do the rhetorical analysis before the persuasive essay, which will be your final essay this quarter. Now, in the Colorado State reading, they also have what they call 5 key questions. There are really 6 in there, unless I'm not good at counting, but we'll focus on the first 5 here and then the 6th one on the next slide. So the key questions that they suggest asking: what is the writer's purpose? People sit down to write things for a reason. I sat down to do this video lecture to help you all understand what a rhetorical situation is, right? So the rhetorical purpose might be multiple purposes, right? So what is the writer or the communicator's purpose? What are they trying to accomplish? What influences writers? Well, if we think about it, there are 2 parts of it. Their interests, what they'd like to do, and their needs, what they must do. Now, if we again take this from my point of view right now, my interest, what I'd like to do, is help you all better understand rhetorical situation. What I need to do is include some instruction that will help you do that, because that is part of my job. So I need to do it because it's part of my job, but my interest is really in helping people better understand rhetorical situation and rhetoric, because it's a key component of our lives. The next part is, what is the reader's purpose? So, again, if we think about why you're watching this video, because I guarantee that some people in the class will not be watching this video. So if you are watching this video, why are you doing that? What is your purpose? Now, Colorado reading says, most readers don't read something unless they see some sort of benefit in doing so. My guess is you're watching the video because you want to understand rhetoric, or you want to get a good grade, or both, or maybe you're just really, really bored. And if that's the case, I'm sorry. So what influences the reader? Well, it's really something similar. Their interests and their needs, right? Maybe the interest is, I really want to learn rhetoric, and their need is, I need to get a good grade. But also that goes back to values and beliefs. Hey, if I am good at understanding rhetoric, I'm going to be a better friend, a better family member, a better coworker, etc. What do writers and readers know about each other, right? The lack of accurate representation, Colorado says, of the reader will result in something poorly written. Another way to think about that is, if we don't really think about our audience, we cannot be as effective as communicators, whether that's speaking or writing or what have you. So we have to have some idea about each other. Now, what about the other way around? Readers or audience members likely want to know something about the communicator, about the writer or the speaker. For example, you know that I am an instructor for English 101 at Shoreline Community College, and there is some reason that you have taken this course in this section. Maybe it fit with your schedule. Maybe your friend took the class. Maybe you read one of those online review things and decided that you would take this class, right? But there's something that you know about me even before you begin watching this video. Now, the sixth one, as I mentioned, they talk about in terms of context. So context, they say, is writing is a social activity dealing with the setting in which the writing takes place. I think that this is something that we overlook because we begin to generalize. And when we generalize, this is when people say, this piece of writing is for anyone, or this piece of writing is for everyone. And I will reiterate throughout the course that no piece of writing is for everyone and no piece of writing is for anyone. And if you're not sure about that or you don't believe me, please come talk to me. Maybe you can change my mind. All right. So part of that context, Colorado talks about in terms of physical context, that is where and when something is written and when it's read. That might be, hey, I'm creating this in my house prior to the beginning of the quarter while people are out of the house and it's nice and quiet. And you're maybe listening to this while you're doing dishes or you're watching it in the library. That changes some of the reception of things. The social context, writers and readers from the same or similar communities are more likely to communicate effectively with each other. Okay, so socially, in a broader sense, we're part of Shoreline Community College in Seattle in a particular year. And then they talk about cultural context. Their explanation, I like this. They say readers from the American Midwest might find it easier to understand the allusions and metaphors used in a document written by someone from Oregon than those in a document written by someone from Peru or Sri Lanka. Cultural context makes a big difference. If you are someone who is not born and raised in this geographic area, maybe English is your third, fourth, fifth, sixth language, it might be a little bit more difficult to understand some of the references. Maybe I'm talking too fast. Maybe the closed captions, the subtitles are helping you a little. All of that is influencing how you can receive the message. Okay, whoops. I'm trying to keep up with myself here. Okay, now we've seen this, or we'll see it several times this quarter, depending on what I've covered in class by the time you watch this video. And this is the rhetorical situation. And it's a really good visual representation of how all the pieces fit together: the writer, the subject, the audience. And I like this as a model, and I find that it can be helpful at a foundational level. But there's one thing that I think most students, are probably unfamiliar with. I'm trying to go backwards and it's not letting me. Okay, that is exigence. So let me see if I can. Okay, so exigence is up here in the left corner between writer and subject. It's the overlap between those two. So what is exigence? In rhetoric, exigence is an issue, problem, or situation that causes or prompts someone to write or speak. The term exigence comes from the Latin word for demand. In other words, why now? Why are we saying this now? What is the relevance? So I think of exigence as kind of the spark, or a fancy word would be catalyst, the thing prompting something to happen. So let's say, for example, Dolphy, for those of you not familiar, Dolphy is the mascot here at Shoreline Community College. We are the Dolphins. Let's say the exigence is Dolphy got a bad grade. Why does Dolphy want to talk to the teacher? Right? That's his exigence. Dolphy has a problem, his grade. It prompts or causes him to approach his teacher for a better grade or to understand what he did wrong or what have you. So when we think about this in terms of that image, the writer, the communicator is Dolphy, because Dolphy is initiating that communication. The exigence, right, why the writer is writing about the subject, is the bad grade. The purpose, and which got cut off here on this slide, is over here to understand why he got a bad grade. The subject, obviously, again, a little bit redundant maybe, is his grade. His audience is his instructor. And if in terms of genre, how the subject is presented to the audience, Dolphy might choose writing a formal email or maybe approaching the teacher after class. Those are going to require different skill sets and slightly different approaches. So we could also talk about this in terms of that SOAP acronym: speaker, occasion, audience, and purpose. Who is the speaker? Dolphy, a student. The occasion is the bad grade. The audience is the instructor. And his purpose is to understand why he got a bad grade. So now that we've kind of unpacked the broader situation and the exigence a little bit, I do want to talk a little bit more about that speaker audience interchange. And by which I mean, like, what's the relationship between the speaker and the audience? What values does each person in that discussion have, right? Dolphy has a motive here, and maybe it's just to understand, hey, why did I get a bad grade? And the instructor might have a different motive. I don't want to regrade everything, or I'm tired of students asking me, right, whatever, for a better grade. So when we think about audience, I think it's important to think about this in terms of primary audience, secondary audience, and tertiary audience, or third audience. And I don't know that I got this from somewhere or if it's just something that I've been using so long, but the way I think about it is your primary audience, in this example from Dolphy, his primary audience would be the instructor, right? The specific audience for that message, the audience that the speaker most wants to reach, right? So everything is designed for that one audience, whether it's one person, two people, 200 people, 2 million people. The secondary audience is a sort of bonus audience. That's an audience that it's not necessarily the focus of the message, but could still do something about it. So let's say Dolphy includes on the email to his instructor his tutor, right? Somebody that's helping him work on his writing. The audience is not necessarily his tutor, but his tutor still has an interest. So it's kind of like in an email when you do that, the CC, the carbon copy, and add a second email. The tertiary audience is a possible future audience or other audience. And we'll talk about this a little bit more specifically when we talk about things like the Sojourner Truth speech, Ain't I a Woman? But when we think about that audience, I think it's also important to think about kind of how rhetoric plays into it. So if we look at this Grammarly thing, right? Who's the audience for this? The primary audience is probably students, because this looks like a student in a library, a college library. And it looks like, oh, it's a student who's not getting great scores. They're not terrible. They got a 85. And then click to open Grammarly in a new tab, right? So how can I get better? How can I be a better writer? Now, if the primary audience is students, a secondary audience might be other people who are writing, right? So takeaways when we think about rhetoric, right, is to think about who is speaking, why they're speaking now, what values, morals, or ideals they might have, how do those values relate to their intended or primary audience, and what are they trying to accomplish, right? Are they trying to sell something? Are they trying to change somebody's mind? What is it? Okay, so there you go. This video went a little bit longer than I anticipated, so I kind of sped up here at the end. I apologize for that. But if you have any questions, comments, concerns, jokes, memes, or recipes, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll talk to you all later.